I can start without the slides. Oops, usually there's a cord right here that I grab, but I appreciate the change in agenda at that time of year where schools are having their Christmas concerts, and my daughter has one later this evening, so I appreciate that. So first, I just want to say thank you to the board for really taking this initiative to create a strategic plan, and also congratulate you on the hire of Jim and Jamie as well. I've had the pleasure of working with them over the last week, reviewing KPIs, which you'll see today, and some of the items in the plan. And I know, just based on those conversations, I said to Matthew, we're building a plane as we're flying it, right? And there's got to be this systematic approach to how this is going to get implemented. I think Jim and Jamie are already on that path, right? They're trying to work on some of the initiatives that you'll see in here. But there's more in the plan, which I know you have a copy of. So, all right. So what I'm going to talk about, and I'll be, like I said, I sent the slides, I'll get them out. I just sent them to Jim so they can be posted as well. But what I'd like to talk about is real quick about the process to date that we've gone through, a summary of the listening sessions that we had with the 9 schools.
Brady's the one that can help you with that.
You can help me get that connected. And then, talk about the draft plan and take any feedback or questions from that. Review the key performance indicators where they are today. They're in really in a draft form right now. And then talk about the next steps. So if you recall, we started this kind of funnel idea. We had the responses from the board. We did the survey of the employees, 196 responses. We did a survey for the community as well, 470 responses. I offered one-on-one with anybody from the board who wanted to talk to me about some of those responses as well. And then we created those draft pillars, and we'll walk through those in a second with the action items. We also held the listening sessions. So great recommendation. I went to every school and provided the opportunity for individuals to come and speak to me. Very insightful. Really, really good feedback and discussion. And, I'll say that, a lot of passion and dedication to the children of this district, which was great to have those conversations. And then all of that got put into the draft plan that you have received. I think Stacy, you probably sent that out as part of the packet. So all of that was put into those draft action items. And from that, and there's a section in the draft about the KPIs that are really still in formation, because we're going to have to get some baseline data and things that go along with it. But so real quick, I'd like to provide a little summary on the listening sessions themselves. So we held them at all 9 schools, some in the morning, some after school. They were confidential. I made sure that everybody understood that I wanted just to have a closed door discussion with anybody who wanted to attend, so they were comfortable with that process. So what I did in those sessions is I reviewed the survey results from the employee and the community, particularly around the questions on the focus areas, because I had some specific questions there, and how they align between the board and the community and the employee groups, and went through each of those. And then I had some follow-up clarification questions for the employees, and I'll talk through those in just a minute. And then presented the draft pillars and the feedback from the surveys that built those draft pillars with those definitions, which the board has all seen. So the 4 follow-up questions were related to social and emotional development being the number 1 item on the focus area. So really asked why was that the highest item, and asked for any feedback there. School safety and security ranked 3rd, and wanted to get a better understanding of that survey response. Facilities, which was also ranked fairly high. What are the issues and opportunities that exist to solve some of those issues? And then concern regarding employee recruitment, retention, and recognition, and asked for feedback in why, what the concerns were, and what some opportunities might exist to address employee recruitment, retention, and recognition. So Jim does have a copy of a memo and all the raw data. I'll actually attach it to the back of the plan as well. And so what I did is I summarized it for Jim, but then left every answer. I didn't squish any answers together. I left it raw as I captured the notes in each of those sessions. So we can make that available as well. So from the social and emotional development question, and ask any insights. And what I heard from the sessions was this is around students' inability to self-regulate their behavior, manage their everyday interactions, advocate for their own needs, manage their mental health issues, and which are obviously can be greatly impacted by any aspect in the community, right, for those individuals. And this has a great impact on those students' ability to learn and other students' ability to learn is what I heard as well. And that teachers don't always have the resources or training to effectively address those. And while there's an important understanding on academic and academic achievement, that there's an understanding that there's a priority here too with behavior in the classroom and the ability of all to learn. School safety and security ranked third. And as you can imagine, this was a full spectrum answer. Everything from, oh, thank you very much. To this here. Oh, it's pretty small on there. Okay, so from the school safety, like I said, it's a full spectrum. It was personal safety, safety of other students, building access and security, which there were a lot of times how it's gotten better, but there's always opportunity for improvement. Even outdoor safety, whether it's parking lots and where children have to cross, it's out in open areas, obviously, and what could happen there. Layout of building, emergency preparedness, consistency and policy, and then effective communication when there is a concern or an issue or the responses there. Next, we have facilities. And again, you can imagine kind of a pretty broad spectrum. Initial responses, though, were around age of the buildings and the infrastructure, HVAC, plumbing, outlets in the classrooms, Wi-Fi consistency, roof leaks, all those things that would go with age of a building. And then some general maintenance, painting of walls, cleanliness, the floors. There was an appreciation for the staff in the buildings and the maintenance staff, and that they do their best, right, with what they have, and they do a great job. A lot of comments around the work. It's just a matter of there's an understanding these buildings are aging. And other comments around that the buildings aren't necessarily designed for how education is delivered today. So whether it's collaborative space, different setups and rooms, updated labs, those types of things. And that this feeling that if the buildings were in a newer state, that children would treat them differently. So, and I'm just giving you the feedback from these here. And then employee recruitment, retention, and recognition. You can imagine this did take a good amount of time, and I appreciated it because we understand how recruitment today is tough, how retaining employees is important, especially in today's environment. Compensation and pay scales and benefits were discussed. Sign-on bonuses for new employees was brought up by a lot of employees saying they didn't appreciate that component. Recognition for longevity, an overall loss of trust was stated in the district. And then you can, the others, sorry, the little things here, let me hide this real quick. Transparency and communication, time constraint on educators, prioritization, their plates are full, but yet they have more to do, adequate resources, and being treated as professionals and overall culture. So that was the feedback on the listening session. So I'll stop there. Any questions? So all of this is, again, drove the creation of the action items in the another component of information. Okay, so we take all this in and we start to develop the action items under the pillars. And as I said, each pillar has opportunities for improvement. And we can all speculate why, but we just know at the current state, there's opportunities each one of these. And I know many of them you're already aware of, right? You already know. And now it's a matter of how do we get that structure in place to begin to address the items that are identified through all of that feedback. So first pillar, student success. So what I did here, you've seen this slide before, has the definition. I just summarized the bullets. There's lots of action items in your plan. So we think about what action items do we need to achieve a student success. So one is, what are our gaps? How do we identify those gaps, and how do we start to build that plan for what those gaps are? Your SFA work would be an example, right? You've identified an opportunity. You're starting to initiate a process in order to address the curriculum and other components. So classroom instruction, how do we get our students to grade level and achieve a year of learning for each year they're in school? The STEM into STEAM, and ensure we're incorporating those components, because we heard that from the feedback as well. Real world learning activities in the curriculum. Actually, I heard it here, there's comments around in the presentation, the meeting before, I heard how some of those are built into those plans. How do we have data driven collaboration? How do we understand the data we have and make our decisions to ensure our students are academically proficient? Our community partnerships are important. We have good ones now. How do we continue to leverage those? How do we understand the mental health component on students' academic achievement? I'm not saying that a school district should be a mental health provider, but those mental health concerns are in the classroom. And how do we ensure that we can have academic achievement at the same time? And what's the strategies there? And then, how do we have goals to the social emotional component? How do we incorporate goals to improve their learning, decision-making, behavior, and independence? So how do we balance that, having that behavior addressed, as well as allowing everybody to learn? And then from the special education component, this is a conversation I had with Jim and Jamie, is how do we ensure that we're aligned in the metrics with the state of Wisconsin? More detail in the plan. So I'll stop there. That's pillar one. Thoughts? Any questions? Okay. We can move to student culture. Again, another important component is here. What's our gap in this? How do we complete that gap analysis? And overall, we want to provide a safe environment for everyone in the building, right? Whether that is students, staff, teachers, whoever is in that building, we want that safe environment. How do we recognize and reward student success? Develop that culture of accountability. And there's a lot of terms here: accountability, fairness, diversity, promote learning, inspire pride, respect, all of that. How do we start to build that culture that everybody's treating each other respectfully within the building and across the district? And then again, how do we leverage those community partnerships? There's a lot that our community can offer in some of these learning components about interpersonal skills, relationship, commitment, community. Again, we have good ones. How do we leverage them or expand them? Workforce engagement. I have a passion on workforce engagement. It's something that I try to engage in my professional career. So one thing I say is, what is the current culture of the district? And really my recommendation is, let's do that assessment, right? I think we have different cultures in the schools, right? And just the broader culture of the district. And how do we ensure that that culture is what we want it to be? We have to do a comp and benefit review. How are we competitive with our surrounding districts? If we're going to lose somebody who wants to stay in the community, they're going to go to Valders or Mishicot or someplace else, right? And they're going to stay here. So we want it competitive. We don't want to lose somebody, a good employee, based on pay or benefit, and just making sure we stay competitive. What is that recruitment and selection process? I talked about making MPSD an employer of choice. And so how do we continue to recruit? Part of the feedback, I think I might have said this before, I had employees telling me that they're one person in the survey said, my child's in school to be a teacher right now and has been told, don't go work for Manitowoc. Right? And we got to change that. Substitute teacher, right? You have teachers who they have this dedication to their children. And I said, my wife's 25 years, teacher, 22 years teaching. When they're sick and they don't have an option, they go to work. Well, it's not good for their own personal wellness. So how do we have good substitute teacher recruitment? Recognize years of service. I heard that as a comment as well throughout. Recognition, that cooperative learning environment, all focused on student achievement. Communication, heard that a lot. And that communication is top to bottom, right? How do we ensure there's clear communication from the board, from district administration, from principals to the employee? And because they just want to know, and I heard things like school board minutes used to be pushed into emails, right into their inbox. Now they have to go. There used to be newsletters. I know Jamie's already working on one, which is great. How do you, even people saying the sense of family of, we used to announce who's coming, who's leaving, who had a baby, etc. Those types of communications as well. And so how do we continue to bring that forward and manage that communication? Have the professional development, invest in our staff and ensure they have the skills that they desire to accomplish what we're asking them to accomplish in this plan. And then the connection between Jim as a superintendent and the board for execution of that plan. Jim shared with me, and we'll talk about this a little more in this book, right? And I read specifically chapter 8, I think, which talks about structure of the board and how do we ensure Jim has the support to execute the plan, because that's why you have him here, right? Is to work through this plan itself. And then how do we measure our employees' satisfaction and create an action plan around those survey results? So I'll pause there. Any questions on board forms?
Is this a draft plan or what exactly are you?
So you have the full plan.
Okay.
And unless there is significant changes, I would say it's a near final plan, based on any feedback from today. Unless we're missing something, if you feel that there's something that has been missed in the plan. These are the categories that have every single item that you have in that Word document. These are the summary of all those items in that plan.
And with detailed metrics still to be.
We're going to talk about
established.
KPIs here in a minute, the measurement portion of
Okay. Yeah, I guess, one concern I had just looking at pillar 2, and I didn't see it here in the email, but I saw something on, the whole DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't know if there's
it.
over on that.
I'm looking at the actual action items here.
Yeah, it was one of your bullet points.
Well, I said implement a plan that enables students, and so the actual action item written here is implement a plan that enables students and staff to connect to a culture that embraces accountability, fairness, diversity, equality, inclusion, and respect, inspires pride, and promotes learning. So a superintendent advisory council, expectations for staff and students to hold everyone equally accountable, a fair and equitable student discipline policy, and a student engagement survey. So if you read the action items below that, a recognition and reward system for student success. Well, that jumps to the next one. So that action item is around how does Jim get feedback from the students? How do we have accountability? How do we have a fair and equitable discipline policy? And how do we get student feedback in order to make action plans around that?
All right, and
So it's item 2.3 in the plan.
yeah, and I don't know if I got that, unless I'm just reading this wrong.
It would have been something I sent to you.
Okay. Well, I got that Word document. I just don't know
Yeah,
if
so it's
all
in,
detailed.
so if you go under student culture, section
Yeah.
2, it's on page 5 of the document. It's item 2.3.
Yeah.
And the sub action items are what would achieve that broader 2.3. So again, a student voice for Jim, how does he collect that student voice? Accountability, right, for staff and students. Fair and equitable discipline policy, and a survey, a student engagement. Yeah.
I thought this was really highly informative, but exhausting. I mean, I just thought, holy God, we got everything there but the kitchen sink. And it's like there's problem after problem after problem that needs to be addressed. But the thing is that it's got to be a plan that people can do.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, it needs a lot of distillation. It needs a lot of distillation. I mean, I think that there are all sorts of things on the list that are related to one another.
Yes.
We need to put them. I mean, I'm just I like Thoreau's advice, which was simplify, 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 so that we can then devise a strategy to address those related problems. I mean, I thought this was still pretty much a kind of a data collecting process, and I just don't see it as a coherent coherent plan. I mean, it's a laundry list, a very good one.
Right.
It raises a lot of interesting and important questions, but
Carrie, did you look at the Excel spreadsheet?
yeah, I did. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
So let me make two, can I answer that real quick?
Yeah.
So two things. One, this is a 3-year plan and it has to be sequenced, right? We have to prioritize by year in order.
Yeah.
And two is you are absolutely correct that there is so much overlap in here and there is a lot, I wouldn't say problem after problem after problem. I would say that there are items in here that,
Certainly are related.
they're related and
Overlap.
maybe have been overlooked for a period of time.
Yeah, I think that's true.
That needs
I
to
think
be,
that's-
that need to be addressed. And there's certainly some quick wins that can happen in this. You know, not every one of these is a 6-month project.
Yeah, I was aware of that.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these things are pretty profound and, you know, we're only, how many members and only a modest sized administration. And I just don't see how we're gonna do like task forces on, I mean, there's 4 pillars, with 4 pillars. I
And,
think we have to prioritize.
and I'm not recommending task forces. A lot of these are operational issues that Jim's gonna have to implement.
Yeah, that's
With this
true.
team.
That's-
Right, I'm
yeah.
not recommending you create a lot of committees and task forces to get this accomplished.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
I guess I've said my part.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Stacy, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to
Yeah.
see if he had asked that. Go ahead.
So as far as the dashboard, I'm looking at the dashboard. So I see the X percentage on there, and
Yep.
you know, based on this the key performance indicators area where you look at those items. The X percentage, how is that going to be established, and how is that quantified?
Correct. And so that, when we talk about next steps, one is we have to determine the baseline, right? So I have to work with Jamie and Jim to identify current state, to put that number in there first.
Okay.
And then there has to be, where do we want it to be? Whether it's year 1 or year 3. And that's where we'll then calculate what that improvement percentage will be. So there's the math that has to be done.
There's still some things that have to be entered in.
On the KPIs, those have to still, we gotta get that baseline data pulled and in place. And those are still in flight right now. I'm still working directly with Jim and Jamie to determine the overall metrics and what data we have.
Okay. And then is that good? So, I think as we've heard through the process is a living document, et cetera. So are the plan in utilization of this strategic plan is that we continually revisit this, see where those KPIs are at, and reassess and kind of re-engage
Yeah.
to make those numbers.
So two things with that. One recommendation is that a section of the strategic plan is on your agenda each meeting.
Mhm.
Just to get an update on, are we making progress? Are there roadblocks? Or Jim saying, hey, we had prioritized this first based on current, what's happened over the last, we gotta flip, right? And, a strategic plan is a living, breathing document. Typically, when you get towards the end of the year is when you begin to refresh it and say, okay, what do we want for the next year cycle to be the priority items?
Do you, as far as the making aware, do you encourage in these strategic plans making, people aware of where we're at on those benchmarks? I mean, as far as I guess what I'm thinking of when I see this is, we throw up the strategic plan. Here's what our goals are. And then we have these numbers. This is what we're hoping to achieve. And then we have another area where we put it out to is that kind of
So that
how you roll
spreadsheet,
those out?
yeah, so that spreadsheet should have a baseline, should have a goal, and then should have a point in time you're able to measure the item. Some will be monthly, some will be quarterly, some will be whatever, 6 months, whatever the point is that data is filled in at the frequency you can collect it. And that should be part of your packet so you can see the numbers and the metrics on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you.
That's why that spreadsheet is created. And what I told Jim is we'll have one, each year it gets updated, right? Because you have year 1 goals, year 2 goals, year 3 goals, and it has to, it has to be fluid to the next year. Yeah. All right.
I think, yes, if I could just make a quick comment here, I think these KPIs look pretty good for a first run here.
Yep.
And we definitely need to drill in on more specifics, but
Yep.
what I'm curious, and this might take some more discussion, Jim, is, a lot of these numbers, if I understand it right, are really just kind of annual assessments we get, right? So, we want to,
There are assessments, there are lead assessments, that lead into, so it's going back to those metrics that were accumulating through the year that lead to an ultimate sum of them, that could be there. And also, if you're looking at certain things, for example, we could look at the report card as an example. The report card has a score that could say it exceeds expectations, and yet you aren't at proficiency levels you want to be. So again, we need to identify those metrics that really tell us that we're moving in the direction we want to be, so that all kids are meeting or performing at a grade level or above, in terms of proficiency levels. So we do have to be selective in terms of making sure we're communicating to ourselves and with the public, and they're also guiding, our.
yeah, that's what I was going to get at, is we need to identify those key, whatever.
That's what the process we are right now in terms of honing that in, in terms of what are those key ones that are going to be meaningful to us. And then I think, the clarity of purpose and that focus, the clarity of purpose and focus is really key here. Moving your top priorities will in many ways resolve many other issues. We talked example, like, is it beneficial to have a curriculum improvement that might be systems wide, because we're recognizing we might not be connected. We understand a lot, but we haven't brought it together. So could that be a big solution towards, some of these things that addresses multiple factors in here?
Right.
But again, this is short time. We're working to hone that in and to be specific enough that it really does inform and guide our instruction and into a priority area to, what is the one thing that will make the most difference that you could accomplish? The more you're hitting that, you're likely to have other needs met because you're focusing on the most important.
Just Tony, I'm sure you're thinking is you want that data to be either showing you are or you aren't making progress based on the action items you have in place, right? You're achieving.
Right. Yeah. What I'm getting at is just, here's an analogy that I like to use when I'm thinking about this. Imagine you're on a diet, right? You want to lose weight. The scale is your KPI, right? It's going to show you, like, here's how much I weigh now and here's how much I want to weigh.
Yeah.
And so in between when you first step on the scale and in between when you last step on it, things need to happen if that number is going to go down.
Right.
And that's what I'm getting at, is what are those
Those
things?
lead
And we need to
indicators.
identify those, 3 to 5 things or whatever they are per area, the most important things. And that's what we want to
Do
measure.
this and you'll get that.
Yeah, over
Mhm.
time, because that'll at least give us visibility every month as opposed to every year or whatever we get on the scale. Hey, are we doing the things that are going to cause that number to go down or up or whatever we're trying to accomplish?
So, for example, kind of to run this through, so under workforce engagement,
Yep.
Number 3,
You're
reduce days.
you're looking at the spreadsheet, correct?
Yes, correct. Reduce days to fill open positions, and then we're going to say we're going to have a baseline or whatever it is, and we've identified, we've distilled it down to that's one of the things that we need to improve on, and we're going to put a baseline to it in the C category, which will be what our goal will be or what it is now, and then we're going to be able to quantify, look at that and see if we've been able to reduce that. Like, that's because that was one of the points. That's what you're trying to do.
And then on top of that, I think that we would have, when we do these check-ins on one of the pillars, or something with the strategic plan every month, we say, to Jim, what was the intervention, right? Or we look at the data and we say, what needs to be the intervention? How did we do this quarter? And what are we going to change to get that up further? Or do we stay along the same progression? And that's how I see that working. Is that what you're thinking we would be doing as well?
Yeah, just something to give us more, the ability to to measure our progress as we work towards the goal, so
Yep.
that we can course correct if things aren't working and make adjustments as needed. And, you know, ultimately, I think that would be a great tool if we can somehow tie that into our website, just to have transparency on our progress, right? And hold ourselves accountable and let the public see, you know, these are the things that we're measuring that are gonna cause the results that we want, right?
Well, and
So-
some of the things that we use in education, for example, is when we look at the state report card, it's a summative. That doesn't, you know, when you take that apart to try to figure out what you're doing, it's like performing an autopsy. The body's dead, you know, it doesn't, you know, so what is it that leads to a high end, you know, and those would be more formative assessments, interim assessments. You're looking at those things, those lead indicators.
Yeah.
If you do these things, it's going to cause the improvement to get to that ultimate summative assessment. But it's something that, for example, we use formative interim assessments to guide instruction, because we don't want to wait to the end of the year before we make adjustments. We want the data now so that we are adjusting our practice when we're recognizing what we're doing wasn't working, you know, to the extent that it might need that adjustment. But again, it informs everybody, you know, so that it's something that not only informs us, and there could be layers of this, you know, if we're saying this, then what do they do? That might even be more detailed. Right. But all of that to communicate at a level that we clearly are seeing our progress, not waiting to the end of the year. You don't want to be at the end of the year to look at an audit to find out where you're at.
Right.
You want to know where you're at going throughout the year, so you can see already, you know, in terms of what helps us understand that.
And one thing I'll add, Jim, if there are gaps in the state requirements or in the state testing, whatever we get on the report card, you know, I think we should definitely discuss and look at having our own, you know,
Right.
measures that we want to include with
This
that.
state report card, you know, again, you would have to, Manitowoc isn't looking to be average. We're looking to be good, but why be good when you can be great? That's really, we got some big, hairy, audacious goals here about elevating it, but it is going back, you know, to again, being able to monitor this, you know, in such a way that we are recognizing any adjustment that we can make along the way that continues to refine and to hone in, we're going to do it.
A question about the, as far as the KPI, data, diving and compiling and everything, how is this data, is there a plan as to how this data is going to be compiled and then brought forward to update onto the strategic plan? Has that been discussed, or?
We're in that process of drilling down. We do have assessments that we use all the time, you know, in terms of what are the key ones, you know, and there could be others. That's that process right now that we're trying to hone that down, you know, to make sure that it is communicating what we need. Both to drive our, you know, in terms of our work, as well as informing the board and the public.
And I'll have the spreadsheet set up that any equations we need to do averages or math on it will be done. It'll just be a matter of plugging in.
You know, some things, you know, parent satisfaction, it could be an annual survey. I mean, we could do it more often, or it could be targeted, you know, but that's quite often what we've based, you know, some of our assessment on right along, right?
So we've had assessments, now we just need to have a place to put them.
And also the strategies, though, in terms of what are we don't just want to wait to the end of the year. You know, what is it that we're hearing that we work on is probably going to improve that assessment. You know, what is it that parents want? I mean, you know, I heard some of this the other day. The board members are already getting feedback from parents about what their expectations are. You know, are kids in school or are they home? I mean, you know, so there's all kinds of things that play in here. But recognizing in terms of we're serving a customer base, you know, and so it's important for us to understand not only what we recognize as important, but they see that too, and that we were able to measure that.
And then the dashboard is intended to be for you to see easy, quick, what those metrics are. And then you can decide, you know, how you want to format it to post it for the public.
Thank you.
That was the end of my question then. So how can we integrate this into, you said before, you said you wanted to maybe bring it on the agenda for our meetings, but how do we integrate that at the school level? So that, like the dashboard that we could, and then who's going to be, I know that's something we would talk about, but how are we going to integrate this so that we can have a constant return loop of information?
So my comment on the agenda is a pillar or a section should be discussed as part of your agenda. So say we're talking about workforce development or engagement now, that you would at your, say this was the meeting, it would be workforce engagement, strategic discussion workforce engagement. And Jim or somebody from his team could give that update to the board of how we're progressing and the goals that were set for this year. Right. And that would then, the dashboard, in my opinion, should be just part of your packet every month, every meeting. Right. It should just be always there. And then it'd be up to Jim and his team to make sure it's up to date.
That's,
I mean, I studied the humanities, and so, the dashboards and the data and all that sort of stuff. A lot of the problems seem to me to be relationship problems,
Or are those
which are hard to like gather hard data on, as you'd say, and hard to like, measure how nice people are being to one another, et cetera, et cetera. But, when relationships begin to like click,
Yeah.
you just know, right? And it seems to me that, we really need to work on the relationship problems. For example, I mean, there's a real concern about trust here. There's a concern about, people not being treated fairly. I mean, geez, they're not so easily reduced to. Let's get a bar chart and see how it goes up and down. I mean, it's
Carrie, though, I mean, I'm a psychologist and we use the scientific method. You have to be able to look at how are you going to measure happiness? I mean, we look at depression rating scales, right? We do it pre-treatment.
sure you can
and
measure that
post-treatment.
stuff, but can you fix it? Can you fix it
Well,
other
sure.
than creating better relationships?
Well, sure, but if that's the goal, for instance, right, one of the things was the board wanted to be more present at the school. So we decided the intervention was, let's adopt a school, let's go in and let's participate in the school, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, I think those interventions are what you're talking about, should be able to be measured in a certain way. So, for instance, if the communication, which is awful, gets better, you would see more retention. You'd see more people that are responding. Like, I'll give you another example. When we started talking about the interim superintendent search, I had a little paragraph that I wrote and we put a link on there, and I got tons of emails from staff saying, thank you for putting that up there, and that each week when we met with Joe, was another thing that we added. So, I mean, again, I think we're going to get feedback from that, but we have to be able to measure those sorts of things and create an intervention based on that.
Okay.
So, Carrie, I'll tell you, there are, from say an employee engagement standpoint, there are surveys out there that are validated surveys on asking questions like, the person I report to treats me with respect. I have the tools I need to do my job, right? Things like that, those questions. And if you have action items related to whether it's communication, whether it's culture work, the results of those survey that's what you're going to see your improvement in. When they take it now and they take it 6 months from now or a year from now, and there are plenty, Press-Ganey, others do these on a regular basis, and they're validated.
I know you've already identified areas of conflict.
Yeah.
For example, new teachers are feeling like really disrespected by teachers with greater seniority. People who have longer careers are really resenting that $5,000 bonus, et cetera, et cetera. That all, I mean, we have identified that. I don't see how, just sort of checking the data on that really moves the needle. I think that, we need to, like I said, there are problems of relationships among people and the interaction of various parts of the workforce. And I think that there's a clear indication that the administration is out of tune with the teachers. I mean, that came pretty clearly through, and it's not just a new problem either.
So curious, look, you've identified though, I mean, so I guess you can only control what you can control, right? And you can only know what you know. And if that makes any sense, but what I'm saying is
Makes
that
all kinds of sense.
these are things that we've identified that we can monitor and try to stay as best on. Hopefully, some of those things will help backfill
Yeah.
the appreciation, you know, knowing the fact that are we sending out a survey? Did we send out a survey on January, February, March? Each one of those, if we could quantifiably see that we sent out a survey every single
Yeah.
month, and we know that this is happening,
We know this is happening.
and we as a board know that, you know, all right, we missed March. Why did we miss March? Now though, things aren't gonna fall through the gap hopefully as much. It's kind of a concerted effort into ensuring that some of those same things that you're hoping for are happening.
I guess I'm talking about, I'm talking about methodology of solving problems as much as I'm talking about.
Okay, so then I would ask you, what is your solution? You're making it sound like it's impossible.
Oh, I'm not, I don't think it's impossible.
So
at all.
what would your solution be?
I think that a better environment for human beings to interact and work together. I think
And how do we measure that?
we would look at what the bitches are and try to solve some of those.
Yep.
And do it with the idea that we're trying to create, good relationships.
Right, so
And I think that I just,
see what I love about this though, Carrie, is we've collected every bitch.
yeah, right. I
Okay.
think it's great. That's
Yeah,
why I said this is a wonderful,
Right,
this is a wonderful
we've
laundry
collected
list.
that, it is, and we have also identified in each area what we're gonna do and how we're gonna measure that, and now it's about going out and actually doing it.
Yeah,
And we
right.
can,
I mean,
by looking at this all the time, we're now holding ourselves accountable to this plan that we've said that we're gonna do. So when we look at something a month and we're still not getting the return, we gotta go back and say, what the heck? We're still missing the mark, and what does that look like? And what are we gonna do to fix it?
And we can always add and subtract from that too, correct? I mean, this is a living document, so.
Absolutely.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, if I could add real quick too, I think Carrie's got a valid point, that needs to be addressed, but when I look at the workforce engagement pillar, I think that this could fall right into that, right? And we can come up with some sort of, if it's not in there, like a staff net promoter score or something, right? And that could be something that we work towards,
Right.
right? How do we, and that will all tie into staff retention and all that, but
Yeah.
a lot of it, Carrie, think of it in the context of it, it's just, it's so easy to get sucked into like the problem du jour that sometimes you lose sight of the, where's the big picture at? And this, document, if used properly, and if our team can execute on it, with quarterly, initiatives and targets, we can start to see a lot of progress and just make sure that as we're dealing with the day-to-day, issues of running the district, right, that we still have our eyes on the prize, like where do we want to go? Right. And that's clearly defined. Everyone knows what it is. Everyone's rowing in the same direction. And once you get that going, I mean, as an organization, it's a beautiful thing.
Sure, yeah, I'm on the side of wholeness here, putting things back together in wholeness. And I see a lot of like, let's be social sciencey about this. And I haven't anything against social science, but I think the goals have to be holistic goals. And I don't know.
I think the intervention is going to be relational in what you're talking about. But the KPI needs to be something that we can measure.
Yeah, okay. I'll shut it.
Yeah, yeah.
My only comment is I tried to distill this down and I see us restructuring and removing the silos or the compartmentalization of a district. And now we're trying to cohesively see the good, the bad, and the ugly. So instead of compartmentalization and having separate little factions, now we can more look at it and we can see it quarterly or bi-weekly or whatever. We can see data real intense more clearly is the hope of it is what I'm seeing.
Kathy?
Yeah, the comment that I wanted to add is as you guys are talking, I'm thinking monthly seems like it would be overwhelming and it may be kind of skewed based on just what happened in a particular to a staff member or to a student that particular month. So both Tony and Matthew just hinted at it. It seems to me logically, it seems like a better time to, what do I want to say? Better time to evaluate this would be either bi-monthly or quarterly. Just something I thought I'd throw out there.
So let me comment real quick. So the spreadsheet you have, once we figure out the timing of those metrics, I'll block out the months where you're not collecting it, right? So it could be every other month, it could be every quarter, it could be whatever that point may be. My recommendation regarding discussion at the board really is a pillar a meeting, which means you're every month you're getting a pillar, but it's not always the same pillar that you're talking about.
Right, it doesn't mean we're collecting data monthly.
Correct. You're not collecting data monthly either. That is correct. It's all gonna tie to when and how you can collect that data and what frequency you want to collect it at. But those are still in flight a bit. We don't have them all locked down.
When is there a specific timeline that's that has been figured as far as when we would have those KPIs kind of established and worked into this? Is there
Well, my
timeline?
understanding, this plan is a July 1 implementation of the plan, right? It's a 3-year, but although you're already working on some of this stuff. Idea would be hopefully to get some baseline metrics into that KPI so that we can then know where we want to be.
Build from
Yeah,
there.
so I'll continue building that with Jim and Jamie.
Jamie was just commenting in terms of, as we've been discussing, that we are looking to try to finish that by January, to the extent of knowing where our endpoints are and what are those steps to get there.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's, again, we're
building it as we're flying it, I said, that's part of it is that
end of
if you're starting from scratch, it's a different,
But Jamie just clarified end of January.
End of January.
So,
to at least have those baselines and know what we're going to be measuring and how frequently we want to measure them. I think that's what Jamie, what you're thinking, right?
but there is something here, just along Carrie's point here, the clarity of purpose and that focus in terms of whether those big things, if you solve them, other things are going to solve. And what the board charged, me with, from interim role to now is we're not waiting. We already have a good sense about some things that are really critical. What's important, reading achievement, in student behavior, 2 big issues. What are the main things we get there? And we are a labor intensive business. We're a people business, so relationships are key. That was something we discussed right from the beginning. It's all about getting to, but it's also not losing focus of what's the end product here is student achievement.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's just some key things here that really ties everything else together. And we can't lose sight of that. And I don't think we will. I think what happens here, we're going to have the priorities within this. So it's a strategic plan, but there's going to be some things that surface that are going to be, if we resolve these with the priority, many of these other things potentially start already getting better because they're just connected. But there's a lot here to get that clarity, that we all recognize. Boy, this is moving us.
Last question. So just to define something quickly for me on workforce engagement, because like the detail is very good. I've been looking through it, but I'd like you to define training sessions per year for workforce engagement. Could you just define that?
So I put that one out there as, as the staff identify what educational opportunities they'd like to pursue for their job. How are we? So I did it as we could call it a funding metric. We could call it how many sessions do we approve? Something to say, are they getting the support they need?
Not to deal with professional development. This is something different.
This could be for their own personal professional development. And say a teacher in the classroom wants to take a training course on something, right? Whatever that is. Again, we haven't fully defined it yet, but that was
and I could relate some of these things to things you've done in the past that worked. As an example, at one time we incentivized teachers for pursuing national board
there you
certification.
go.
Sure.
That was a real positive, and we rewarded that as an encouragement. And what do we have now? We have significant number of nationally board certified teachers, meaning they kind of hit a pinnacle of demonstrated success, which again, all of a sudden you just increase your capacity because of the ownership that they took on to do this, but we incentivize it.
So it could be that
it's-
metric, right?
I just
It could
wanted the
change, yeah.
definition of it,
Yeah.
so we were quantifying. what-
Yeah, I was looking at it from the training or coursework or whatever, the staff say they would like to go to, right? Or to, I heard, for example, we have technology in the classroom, but I haven't had a course on how to use it. Right? Okay, so that could be a metric, or that could be in the technology plan too, right? It could be part of that. So.
Okay, thank you.
So on the infrastructure one, this is where the facilities and technologies, how do we build that assessment, understand that plan, map that plan out, right? How do we ensure we have the resources to continue to grow what we're trying to grow, to accomplish this plan, to deliver that high academic achievement, all the other elements here. How do we, again, this also goes to the part of how do we advocate for those resources with the public as well, right? Because you're going to have to educate the public on what is needed in order to invest. And that could be operational expense or facility capital technology expense as well. So that's what these goals are built around. And then lastly, the stakeholder relationship. So on the caregiver side, how are we building trust? How are we measuring their satisfaction and partnering with them? On the community side, similar. How do we get that public support, engagement from the community and measure their satisfaction? And then here's where you also get the communication component, right? Not only internal communication management, but external communication as well. How are we effectively sharing information with the public, like posting the dashboard? And does that mean a resource is needed from a marketing standpoint inside the district, right? And how do you do that as well? And then your own success. How do you measure your own, self-assessment as well as part of that? Making sure you're measuring that, and then aligning, as I already talked about, the agenda to the achievement of the action plan. Yeah, the strategic plan and the pillars. Well, I think we talked a lot about KPIs, so I'm not sure if you need me to. You have this is kind of small when it goes up there, but the in here is how do we measure? So in each one of these are probably the ones that are in the roughest draft because we're still working on identifying those. So what are those that we need in each one of these categories? So there's a number of metrics. Obviously on the success side, there's the growth in the academic achievement, and whether that is the engagement of students and families in the real world learning, and the social and emotional portion of this, which is maybe referrals to counselors, etc. So there's a lot of different metrics we met three times last week to talk through different metrics we can put on here, and they continue to evolve.
I would just like to add that, when we're talking about, and Brett has referred to as Jamie and myself, we are also very interested in getting our colleagues, our teachers, involved in terms of, some of these metrics, because it is really something that we would be using ourselves.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Thank you, Jim, for saying that. So on my next step, so one of the things here is how do I continue to assist Jim and Jamie, but then one of the recommendations, this was, I think came out, Jamie might assist, I go and sit with the principals and have a discussion around these KPIs. Do they make sense? Are these the right measurements? Is this something we can incorporate at the school to get those metrics here? And then ask the principals to have that discussion with their staff as well, to get that feedback and kind of organically build some of these metrics and make sure, one, that we have them, right? And or how are we gonna implement them? How do we gather the data? We don't want to make it onerous either, right? I already heard enough about things being on people's plates, so I don't want to put more and more. But so, the feedback today, the continued build of those KPI, and then finalize all of this. Hopefully, is part of this next step. Yes, there's a lot here, and Carrie, you picked out some of those data elements, and what we try to do is translate that feedback into what are things we can accomplish? And there's a lot. It's like, you know, they're matrix. They're, as Jim said, you solve a couple and other things should be improving it along with it.
Okay, I feel exhausted now. Thanks,
I'm
Brett.
sorry. It's heavy. There's a lot. Strat plans are, I just appreciate the board taking that step as a community member. I think it's important. I think one of the early meetings I was asked who should have strategic plans, and my opinion is everybody should have one, right? Just, it hopefully gives you everybody rowing in the same direction.
All right, well, if nothing else, thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks, Brett.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is our consent agenda. And we have the November 22nd special board meeting minutes, the December 7th Buildings and Grounds, and December 7th executive committee meeting minutes. Is there anything that anyone wants taken off there? Okay, seeing none, I'll look for a motion in a second to approve the items in the consent agenda.
Motion.
Motion from Colin, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second from Tony. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. The next item is our report of the superintendent. And I am looking for a motion and a second to approve our payment of vouchers. Anyone want to make
I'll
a,
make a motion.
okay, Matthew Spalding will make the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any questions or anything you'd like to say, Angela?
Not specifically with the payment of vouchers, you know, just kind of if you look at the total on the summary of the payment of vouchers, we're at $7.1 million. Just kind of looped in with what I was going to say with the financials, you know, we were down to like 7.5 million at the end of November, but we received like $10 million since then. So, you know, it just the flow of cash between every month was a high month for expenditures, but we have waves of that throughout the year. That's very typical.
Okay, all in favor of approving the payment of vouchers? Any opposed? Okay, and then we have our monthly financial report, and we do not need action on that. Is there anything, Angela, you'd like to highlight?
Just I was going to mention about the receiving of significant aid as our fund balance was low at the end of November. And we have also had some extra funding coming in, so that's to look forward to in the next month's reports. And I also have a note about the note at the top of the balance sheet. We were able to move all of the migration of the historical information from Skyward over quicker. So we will have that actually complete, fingers crossed, by the end of January. So 2 months earlier than we anticipated. So
And you thought you were going to have delayed financials, right?
So
Okay.
we may 1 month maybe, we'll
Yeah.
see. But you know, it's nice to have them sooner. So
Okay, excellent. Any questions about the monthly financial report for Angela? Okay, and then we have our personnel report, and I would need a motion in a second to approve that. Okay, Carrie, and second, Tony? Okay, any discussion at all on the personnel report? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, and then we have our district activity update. This is just informational, and Jim.
Thank you very much. Just to start off, it's the season for lots of winter concerts and the like. So just to highlight some, even though you can find them on individual school websites, but at Jefferson Elementary on Friday, December 16th, 9:45, and 1:45 concerts. Wednesday, December 21st, orchestra and band, students caroling around the school. Franklin Elementary on Saturday, December 10th, breakfast with Santa at 8 a.m. to 10. Winter concert Tuesday, December 14th. At 10 a.m. Did you need that date again, Carrie?
Yeah, I did. I want
You want to meet Santa?
Lincoln High School Winter Band Concert, Monday, December 19th at 7 p.m. Winter Orchestra Concert, Tuesday, December 20th. But again, please check out the district websites. Something else that obviously hit the news, not something that we necessarily wanted to, but we had a situation with spiders. And I have been referred to as Spider-Man in church and the like. I've also been cautioned not to use words like eradicate and infestation. But we did experience, after already treating a particular area at Wilson Middle School with spiders. And then all of a sudden we were, again, populated with significant, numbers, significant enough, that we made the decision to close school so that we could come in there and treat the whole building. But Chris has provided some real detail. I shared that with you. And if you have any questions, Chris can even provide further information. But yeah, a lot of airtime, and what we talked about doing a press release, and we said, well, we don't want to make this bigger than what it is. Got out to one, and it was a snowball after that.
Okay, anything else on the?
Yes, I'd like to highlight, in terms of activities, we had a visit, we just preceding this had another activity, so we had a visit to Steubenville City Schools to see SFA in person. And that was great. I mean, we sent 9 teachers, well worth the investment, 2 principals, and our new assistant superintendent, Jamie, went out. And then now, just like we've done with any curriculum review in terms of providing information for parents, well, again, we started this off with looking at 2 pilots. Now we're looking in terms of should we be considering, this at maybe more sites, okay, along the lines. And so we had our first session, today. There will be more. And so we're obviously trying to elevate the level of understanding. So today we have Angela Schlark and Amanda Saraki, as well as Lance Masters, to just maybe provide some feedback in terms of what your experience was like. So yeah, would you like to come up here and just share a little bit in terms of what that experience was like, what they learned, and even this last activity with parents and staff members who attended tonight.
Well, thank you very much. On behalf of the students and staff in Washington, we just want to thank the board members for your service to our district and your leadership in our community. So we appreciate that. We also wanted to thank you for supporting our trip to Ohio, where we got a chance to see the Success for All curriculum in action. I'll give a kind of a brief overview, as I did on the meeting prior to this. And then I want you to hear from our teachers who saw this curriculum in action, the school reform model. So one of the things that we've talked about is Success for All is a whole school reform model. So there's a curriculum component, and we're going to get an opportunity to kind of dive into that reading curriculum. There's some writing components as well. It's also a school organization model. So the model, it would generally be described as distributive leadership. So teachers in the form of committees that take the lead in setting goals for improvement for the school in a variety of different areas, whether it be connections with the communities, family engagement, attendance, student behavior, and so forth. And in particular, the thing I think we probably walked away most impressed with were some of the classroom practices that we saw. So you'll hear from the teachers about specific learning targets. Every class seemed organized around a very specific target. Every class we saw was organized into cooperative teams. We did see a lot more students talking to each other than we saw teachers talking. And so that was a component. And then we also saw students engaged in evaluating each other's work using a specific rubric. And then all of that kind of culminated at the end of the classes and at the end of the learning cycle with what they call celebration points. So that's kind of like an overview of the school reform model. And I just like to turn it over to Angela and Amanda to talk about some of their takeaways specifically.
We're going to start. So I think I was a skeptic. Everyone knows. I'll be honest. But I really.
Could you tell us your position?
Yes.
I don't know that everybody knows.
Yep. Angela Shard. I'm reading specialist at Washington. Been in the school district for 20 years, a long time. I started as a 5th grade teacher at Jackson a long time ago. went over to Madison, and then was reading specialist at Wilson and Jackson, and then had been at Washington the last 7 years. 7 years. So one of the things that I really truly was impressed by was I was a little worried about the scripted, the talk of scripted curriculum, but ultimately what I saw was true gradual release of responsibility. So when we talk about active engagement in our schools now, most of the time that those students were spending, they were talking with each other. They were working collaboratively, which was really a beautiful thing. Kids knew exactly what was expected of them. I think that they were helping each other out. Teachers redirected. It was just, it's wonderful. It's doing good.
I'm Amanda Saraki. I'm new to MPSD, but I'm a product of MPSD. Graduated a long time ago. But I spent most of my career in the elementary level in a bilingual school and taught first grade and was reading specialist prior to coming here. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to go to Ohio and see this in action, because it was really, really eye-opening. My previous district, we did go through a pilot process and adoption process, and now doing it again is kind of exciting. But like Angela said, it was very impressive to see students in charge of their own learning. The teacher was guiding the students through their learning process, so giving those learning targets, giving that mini lesson, but then the students were responsible for their learning, working collaboratively with other students at their level, asking questions, asking clarifying questions, giving opinions and reasoning and evidence from the text. So it was really neat to see that in action. And currently one of the EL teachers at Washington, and Ohio didn't have an EL population, but I did look at it through that lens of how awesome it would be for our EL kids to be in a cooperative learning group and be able to learn from their peers, pick up the language, not have to be nervous to give an answer because there may be somebody else in the group that could answer for them. So I thought that was another nice component. But that active engagement of the teacher, not just up there giving a presentation for 45 minutes, but it was true gradual release.
Sure. I think it was, as someone who's been around a long time, it was reassuring to see that, in Steubenville, some of the same things that we're doing here, they were doing as well. So it isn't completely new. We list specific learning targets with our success criteria every class, every day. We saw that in Steubenville as well. I'm an anchor chart girl. I think that they, having cueing systems on, around your space to help students with language, academic language specifically. We do that here. They were doing that there. So it felt comfortable from what we saw. And obviously their systems, were really specific, especially their learning targets really honed in.
We didn't see any real behavior issues, which was also very eye-opening. The kids knew exactly what the expectations were, so they came in, they knew what materials they needed, they knew where they were sitting, they knew what to do to get started, they knew the whole process. So you could tell that they were very routined, which added a lot of consistency to their day, which would be beneficial for our kids too. I really liked seeing that routine and structure and consistency among all the classes that we were in, no matter what level the kids were at. Obviously we could tell, but I think an average person could go in and just see kids learning cooperatively, which is cool.
It was also really nice, refreshing to see that Steubenville had similar poverty to what we have here in Manitowoc, as well as the diversity. I think that was, it was nice to see that they were like us in many regards, and that they were seeing a lot of success. And that was also reassuring.
So were they using the same gun? format and methods in all other courses.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just spontaneous sometimes. Yeah.
You can see people raising their hands.
So honestly, Angela, thank you for being here. Thank you for being forthright and try to be as clear and concise as possible. I have a question. So you said we do a lot of things that they're doing there, but in your opinion, what are they doing differently that is working for them there? If you can quantify that compared to what we're not doing here, or maybe it's in your facility, or I just try to answer that.
I
to your
mean,
best ability.
honestly, and we over lunch we were chatting a lot about this. As much as I've invested in the current curriculum that we have, I have to recognize, and I will admit that the gaps in phonics and in decoding, especially in our our elementaries, it is really makes it difficult for students to overcome when we are not explicitly teaching phonics.
Thank you very much for being honest and forthright about that
Yes,
answer.
sir.
That's something that,
Please.
Oh, yeah.
No, I know that. I'm just being enthusiastic.
so that's something that this SFA is a little bit more. Do you know what I mean when I say queuing? You know what you ever hear that term queuing or right? It is something that moves closer towards phonics, correct? And away from that. I only say that because I noticed the effects of this queuing and Lucy Calkins teaching through my own daughter. And I did just this last weekend, which you probably know, Layla.
I do.
We were shopping at Meijer and we going through coupons, and then she wanted Doritos and she's like, oh, it's only these kinds. And I'm like, stop looking at the picture. Stop looking at all the things around and read what it says, So I'd have her read it and then we go and find, So it's just one of those things that it's imprinted in her brain to look at everything else except for the words to figure out what the words are saying, which is just weird to me. So I didn't know it was like that until I started paying attention to it and going through this and learning about SFA and I see the negative effects of it. Seriously, even with my own daughter. So that's the one thing I wanted to know is that that's really what this is about. We're moving away from that and going towards
It's
decoding.
I told this story in the last meeting, but we were in a classroom and the kids are working collaboratively and one of the students didn't know a word. And her table partner helped her sound it out using decoding strategies, which I thought was really cool because it meant that that student understood how to decode and she was able to help her classmate to decode.
That's what we need.
Just a question kind of on the same line as what Matt asked is not so much, not just the reading, but I hear a lot even in Lance's presentation earlier, we're doing this and we're doing this and we're doing this and we're doing this, which makes me say, well, then why do SFA, right? If we're doing all this, why go to SFA?
I think a big part of going to a school reform model is the piece of professional development. I think if you want buy-in from your teachers, you have to train them. You have to get them the professional development. You have to let them see it in person. And I think when you go with a program and they provide that, that's going to be the biggest bang for your buck because, the SFA presenters can come and tell you all they want, but until you get the teachers collaborating, the teachers working around a common goal, the teachers having time for professional development.
Okay, now we're looking at a schedule next year that has 9 days of professional development, which is exactly the same that we had this year. So again, I'm going to say we're doing professional development.
Is it purposeful? Is it meaningful? Do we take it back to our schools and implement it? Or is it a glorified work day? Are we working around data? There's all kinds of things that we could, talk about when it comes to professional development. But I think when we're working towards a common goal of implementing a school reform or reading curriculum, we have some really targeted things that we have to have professional development around.
Got it.
In my opinion.
Yeah, and I can speak, I went to Washington when it was still a junior high 7 years ago. I'll be very frank. There are, when I looked at that picture of staff, I think there are 14 of us left from 7 years ago to now. You know, we've had a lot of turnover. We've had a lot of our teachers went to LinkedIn because they wanted to stay subject specific. You know, there were a lot of reasons, right? But ultimately, we have a young staff, and I see that, you know, even at Jackson, you know, like my boys went to Jackson. I started there in my career there. A lot of that staff has you know, retired, you know, left. We have a younger staff in the school district, and I think that the professional development piece, regardless of whatever program you go with, you know, whatever you do, we need some professional development around not only teaching reading, but also specifically how to deal with behaviors.
The thing I would add to that really impressed us, and we talked with the Franklin teachers that were there as well. They said the same thing. You know, there's a system that supports learning where the focus is on like like a specific goal, and then helping the collaborative teams work on that goal and then produce it. But then you see that consistently from classroom to classroom. So they talked about being in every classroom at their elementary school. It was a bigger school, we couldn't get to that. But every classroom we went to, whether it be an English class, social studies class, whatever, it was the same expectation. So when the students see that consistently, it lends a predictability to the school day, and then they're able to focus again on those specific learning targets and achieve. And I think that can, you know, kind of related to what these ladies are saying, is that it's the professional development and the system that points us in that direction. Instead of each classroom is sort of like the silo unto itself, it's the systems is followed in each content area. So no matter what we're learning, we're using the same system and the same incentives and supports and so forth.
Thank you.
And that'll really help young educators that need help, which our turnover rate's so high for obviously many more reasons than just the education field. It's obviously the turnover rate's high everywhere.
Tom?
So our teachers were okay. Oh,
that's okay.
Doesn't have the peripheral vision.
I know.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't have any. I don't have.
Yes, you know, I think one of my skepticisms going in, like I said earlier, was that it was a highly scripted, you know, curriculum. What we saw was not that. It actually looked more like, you know, the Lucy Calkins, the mini lesson. There's a framework, right? Teachers were carrying that book around, right? Like I think I said earlier, like, you know, like that safety blanket. Teachers were not referencing that often. They weren't reading from it. You know, I think it's there if you need it. But ultimately,
So it's internalized.
it's internalized.
Yeah, the art of teaching was not lost in that building. You
No.
could see
Well,
teachers
so it's good for
engaging.
teachers, too.
Yeah, it's good for the teachers. They're engaging with their students.
I want to
You're fine. You're fine.
Thomas?
So we're hearing some good stuff. That, you know, this is a good program. Did you see any obstacles to this that you thought, you know, I know we don't want to hear just this is the new great fancy. What were some of the obstacles that you saw as well?
I'll start off by saying, like, one of the things that we talked about was that the students that got to the middle school had been in this system and understood it and had that sense of predictability for 4 or 5 years. And so when they came to 5th grade at their middle school, it wasn't something new. So we've talked about that. You know, if the board were to approve this and we were to start it at Washington, you know, we'll have 500-600 students that aren't used to that, and that'll take some getting used to. So I think that's one of the barriers. And you know, you guys could talk about like the writing concerns and stuff as well. We talked about.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the writing piece is a concern. You know, some of the teachers who have sort of dug into this, you know, this curriculum or this reform model, we see that as weak. Steubenville, at least in their middle school, was using what we actually use. It's called No Writing. It's not really a writing program. It's a grammar program. I don't love it. It works sort of. But I think that we definitely are, I'm just being honest, you know, it's nice. I think it does provide a purpose. It is not writing for real purposes, you know, with real research. So I definitely think that we're going to have to look at what can we do to make sure that we are raising writers, you know, readers and writers.
And we, in Steubenville, they did, like I said before, they didn't have an EL population and we have a large EL population. So we're gonna have to figure out what SFA looks like with our EL population as well. So that's another little barrier.
I have a question. One of the other schools that we were talking about is, that had a good success, had quite the population of EL students in Alhambra, Phoenix. Are we talking about sending in more teachers?
We are.
I mean, I don't want to,
So,
crazy vacations and all that.
but look what's happened in terms
Point
of
is,
when we
this
have
is amazing, and I
years
agree with
yeah.
that. And I would totally be for just sending some people
And
down there.
Jamie's already gone, so I don't think she should get to go to Arizona.
I haven't been to
Yeah, but she
I'm
got to go on
definitely
the
gonna
last
be EL
You're gonna be the
No,
representative for Arizona
I
for
think it'd be a good learning opportunity, especially for that. too.
I think it's
And
critical.
another deal.
It's a small investment relative to what the return is, because now you have professional peer-to-peer, you know, who are sharing, you know, with their colleagues, what they experience, right? And they've had the same experience here. They know what they're connected. They're sharing similar stories. So
And Alhambra not gonna be as perfect as Steubenville either, because they're gonna have a lot more challenges than even we will be facing. But they're still excelling. So this is a good opportunity to see a little bit of those struggles.
we are planning on that.
Okay.
I think one thing too, I don't know if you saw the videos from Alhambra. Have you seen those? You have?
We
We've
watched
seen some of them.
Oh, okay.
from
The school in Arizona?
I haven't, no, I don't think those are
no,
the ones. that-
sorry, I thought you meant the SFA.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the videos,
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, that is a school in Arizona.
Right, there's some data though on that school, and I
Yeah.
think that,
Okay.
if we got that to you, I think you,
Mhm.
because they do have a huge ELL population, and,
Right.
like Matt said, they have a lot of more disadvantage than we do and what they've been able to do with it, so.
Right. So any of the teachers listening and whatever, let's figure it out. The quicker the better. We want to get some people to see this.
Colin?
So just as a follow-up question to some of the obstacles that, you know, you'd said that they exist. Do you feel like that some of those, you know, obviously, if, you know, we needed to substitute a writing piece, that, you know, actually we're currently using what they use, but it may not be the best is what I'm hearing, but are these manageable obstacles, or is there some significant challenge to any that you're receiving?
I feel like they're manageable. Again, like I think there's like that recognition that it's teaching a new system to a group of students that aren't used to it is probably like the one that's on my mind the most. You know, I think we talked in this meeting earlier too about some of the logistical pieces for how do we get students in with their peers in at their level. And sometimes it's an elementary question, but we have some of the same challenges at middle school. So how do we get those groups together and you know, and make sure that we're not pulling people outside of their comfort zones. So I think those are manageable. We've got teams looking at different options. We'll have we'll have a staff meeting discussion about it, and we'll start forming some of those committees tomorrow about, you know, what are some of the pieces that we want to start looking at. So I think they're manageable, but it's, you know, they're challenges nonetheless.
I think there'll be some growing pains, right? With anything new, we'll have to problem solve around things, try some things, use the program with Fidelity for the first few years just to see how it works for us without changing anything right away and supplementing right away. I definitely think we can work through it.
Yes.
You know, a couple things, and I'll turn over to Jamie. You know, I'm thinking from a board perspective now, from a teacher perspective, can you put the urgency of, you know, where we're at with learning, you know, proficiency levels? Can you kind of highlight what does that mean? You know, what's the urgency here relative to our student learning? And then the second thing that I hear, you know, from our teachers and even parents, you know, is how we engage our staff in this decision making when there's an urgency. I mean, I don't know what you can do to help put this in perspective, but the board's, you know, looking at making a decision potentially in January. So, you know, I think we have to understand from our professionals what our situation is.
Well, coming from a district that was more affluent, there were more kids reading on grade level. You know, we had exceeds expectations on our report card.
Tell everyone where you came from, because I think everybody knows that district and its reputation.
I came from the Kiel School District, and Kiel. And we went through the whole curriculum process because we did have a small number of kids not reading on grade level, and we found those holes and gaps in the phonics and made changes. And now that I came to this district and in a school where there's broken families, there's poverty, there's homelessness, there's so many barriers for the kids to, I'm going to say it, but to overcome, right? So many barriers for them to overcome. The best thing we could do for them is to give them a good, solid foundation. And I see so many kids not reading on grade level at the middle school that I'm at. So many kids that don't have the strategies, and then so many escalated behaviors because it's hard for them. They can't learn. They don't want to learn. It's just,
Yeah.
it's eye-opening when you come from a district to another district and then you see the challenges that the kids are facing. And you know that there's curriculums out there. Anything we do, you know, will show growth. But I think if we take the time to vet, because when we did the process in my last district, it took 2 years from start to finish for us to come to consensus. And you know, these kids are growing and moving. And if we take 2 years, we're gonna lose more time when we could be moving forward with something to help our students learn.
I mean, I'll just speak to this quickly. So I primarily focus on 6th grade at Washington. If I were to take, as a Title I reading teacher, if I were to look at every single striving 6th grader, including special ed and EL or not, right, I would probably be sitting at around 90 students that I would need to see on a daily or every other day basis, which is daunting. Currently, I have 4 core ELA social studies teachers. If I think about implementing a program like SFA, now I can take myself as well as those 4 classes that I have running in the morning as well as the afternoon. Now I have 9, potentially 10 reading classes, reading groups that I can put students in so they can get exactly what they need and we can fill those gaps. So I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but
Well, it gives the perspective that the board needs, because obviously the board's, you know, not the experts here in terms of being able to evaluate this, other than knowing that we want to accomplish a lot more than we
And that's
accomplish.
our real school data. That's not our school report card data. That's our real data.
That's very helpful.
that
Helpful,
helps.
yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for your hard work. I just wanted to point out that I think it's great that you guys are considering going to Alhambra, but I just dug up some data and they had 50% of their student population is ELL and 90% is at poverty level, and they're reading above state averages, which to me is amazing.
Yeah.
And I know if they can do it, I know with people like you on our staff that we can figure it out here. So thank
That's
you.
awesome. Yeah.
So one of the other things you asked about obstacles we currently have a number of students entering kindergarten who are not school ready.
So that would be another obstacle for us. We do have to take a look at that 4-year-old programming that we have within the district, and maybe even look at a school readiness check sheet for those who are coming to kindergarten, and do it maybe in transitional kindergartens. We give them another year of learning. So when they enter that kindergarten classroom, they do have access to their letters, their sounds, sight words, and school behaviors. So that would be another thing that we're going to have to take a look at.
Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, guys. That's all that.
Okay. All right. Well, we have no new business. Other business, just a couple remarks. I just wanted to, the public was not able to, I'm sorry, the board was not able to meet in a closed session last time, and was my fault because I closed our meeting. So I just wanted to let everyone know about that we did not meet. And then the other thing was, people have brought up the consent agenda being illegal. And I did run that by our attorney. It is not, and so we will keep doing that. And if you want some more information about that, I can certainly offer that, but we will be doing our consent agenda. I did, per his suggestion, add the paragraph in front of the minutes, just so that, anyone looking at the agenda would be able to see how, what information the board has prior to making the decision on the minutes. We will not have a second meeting this month, so we won't have our special meeting. Obviously, if something comes up, we will be able to have a special meeting. We'll call that in the proper way if that needs to happen. And then that's the only remarks I have. Future meeting dates that I have here, to my knowledge, that there's a finance and budget committee meeting on Wednesday, December 21st at 5:30, and then a curriculum committee meeting Thursday, December 22nd at 4:00. Okay. And I think other than that, we'll go into the new year without any other meetings. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to say that I might not be able to make the curriculum meeting because we're expecting a child.
Oh, well,
Great.
that might be a reason. Is that okay, Kathy?
You can deal with that one, yeah.
I'm gonna try.
We'll miss it.
We can move locations.
Yeah, how about we move the location to the hospital?
Whatever works.
Unavailable.
All right, well, I am not going to look for a motion in a second to adjourn our meeting because we are going to meet in closed session, but I will take a recess.
Oh, wow.
Well, I was going to do that after, but I can certainly do that now so people don't have to wait. So the Board of Education will vote to convene in closed session for the purpose of considering the following matter: considering the employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of a public employee over which the government body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. This meeting is authorized pursuant to section 19.851C of the Wisconsin statutes. We will be talking about the superintendent evaluation progress, goals, and objectives, and the update on the restructuring of specific central office personnel. And this does require a first and a second.
Oh, motion. Second.
Okay, first and second, and then we do need a roll call vote to move into closed session.
Colin Burnell.
Aye.
Matthew Phipps.
Aye.
Stacy Feldner.
Aye.
Matthew Spalding.
Aye.
Carrie Trask.
Yes.
Tony Lostelka.
Here.
And Kathy Willis.
Aye.
Okay, it's 7:36. We are now in closed session, and we will take a brief recess for everyone to just take a stretch break and go to the bathroom.